We are here. Uh,
Yes.
Hi, my name is Jerea Bradley. I am a product manager with Push Black, and I am based in Los Angeles. I've been with the team for going on 3 years now. It'll make 3 years in June.
Awesome. And my name is Tabitha. I am also a product manager with Push Black. I am based in Austin, Texas, and I have been with Push Black for a little over a year now. All right. So to jump in, we are going to be having a conversation based off the Deacons for Self-Defense. And the Deacons for Self-Defense and Justice is an armed self-defense group that was founded by the civil rights era in Jonesboro, Louisiana. Malcolm X had just been assassinated, and the KKK had declared open season on Black people, openly harassing and killing us. There needed to be some solution to white violence besides nonviolent protesting. Calling themselves the Deacons for Self-Defense and Justice, many Black men quit their jobs to protect our people. They patrolled our communities, protected civil rights protesters against the KKK, and shot at violent, corrupt police who brutalized Black community members, and the strategy worked. The Deacons successfully defended our people against attacks from white terrorists, proving that true liberation does require strategy. And when times call for the use of retaliation, we must defend our lives and our communities by any means necessary.
Yeah, so in the event description, you'll see a link
So,
to this full story if you'd like to read it. But again, this is the Deacons for Self-Defense. And, when it comes to physical and community protection, there are a few examples of this, like the Deacons for Self-Defense, as well as the Black Panther Party, which we all probably know. But we also know that protection is just more than just physical threats, which is why groups like the NAACP, even HBCUs and media entities like Push Black and Ebony and Jet Magazine, which came before us, were all created and founded to protect us, whether it's politically, artistically, or just representation. And thinking about community protection as well, even churches and like the daycare run by your auntie out the basement are forms of protection. So we really wanted to come forward with this conversation and just an overall discussion on what are the ways that Black people could, the ways that we protect ourselves, and also what it can look like for us today and the times of COVID and everything else that's going on in the world. So let us know in the comments what you think when you hear Black community protection, especially with in regards to our families. How can we better safeguard our families and communities? Tabitha, I'll actually throw it to you to kind of start the conversation about what can protection look like today.
yeah, so just thinking about right now and everything that we're going through, thinking about the pandemic and coronavirus, protection can look like for yourself and your family. It can look like social distancing. And it can also look at like social distancing, but also making sure that you're having a means to communicate so that you are, having that social interaction that we need. Whether that be like phone calls or having your bubble groups where you have a couple different households where you guys are also social distancing and just communicating with each other and seeing each other in person. And then also, this has given us a great time to have dedicated time to just focus on ourselves. So, what do you think, Drea, when it comes to like yourself and your family and protection?
Yeah, I feel like when I think of community protection right now, especially when we can't really be in spaces with each other
Mm-hmm.
physically. So I think a big part of today is, like you said, self-care, and someone else in the comments said that as well. But I also think establishing community, whether online or in person, our power
Mm-hmm.
is in when we come together. And I think that for myself, actually, I know social media and being connected to people in online forums and just seeing Black people talk about how they're coping with what's going on today,
Yeah.
and us all, whether it's sharing memes and we're talking about our stimulus check or whichever, those things for myself make me feel highly protected. I feel a lot more connected to the people that I can't necessarily go out to for drinks or for
Mm-hmm.
brunch or for fun things, but we're still connected online. So I really do think that we have to continue to foster and nurture those safe spaces and the relationships that um, make us feel, or not the relationships, but the platforms that make us feel
Mhm.
connected to one another. And to the point of self care as well, mental health is a big
Mhm.
way to be protected, and also to make sure that we're all being cognizant of each other. I know when we were talking about this prior, Tabitha, you had some points on mental health. So I'll let you take that.
Well, yeah, like when it comes to like to mental health, like just thinking about the fact that, we're so used to like being together. And so now having a social distance and even dealing with just all of the death that's happening, people have lost loved ones, like you've lost friends, you've lost family. And then just to see this happening in the community, like it has effect on the way that we interact with the world and ourselves. And just like seeing if you can, if your insurance provider like will provide free therapy sessions. I know, like for myself, like I've done that same thing at the beginning of the pandemic. There was free therapy sessions for like 3 months, and they still have similar programs going on. But even like choosing like affordable options, like whether that be like your local university or options like BetterHelp and what you can get online, and it gives people access to mental health services. Um, just making sure too that you seek a therapist that is like most like you. And I can say this like for myself, like I've seen a couple different therapists, and the one that I have right now, like she is amazing. Like we can relate on so many different levels, and it is such a huge help to be able to just talk with somebody who understands where I'm coming from and can help me like just navigate some of the day-to-day struggles of like what today right now looks like.
Yeah, and I think you actually kind of bridged both of the points, because for me, there's on one end just safeguarding my own mental health, but I think community protection in a way that I've kind of tried to give back and kind of be there for people around me is also sharing the resources and conversations like we're having like this. I can't even begin to count how many people, you included, I think we probably had this conversation on like a call about where we can get sessions, and just the fact that like a lot of healthcare providers are providing these resources. Someone told me that, and then I told
Mhm.
you that, and then we kind of continue that. So I think that when we talk about community protection, that's a big element of it. Us sharing what we know and resources, whether it's by mouth or just pointing people in the right direction. And then I think when it comes to mental health as well, I think we can protect each other as also just by being patient and
Yeah.
sensitive, empathetic
Yeah.
with each other. We are all on top of each other. Probably, I know a lot of Black families. There's multiple of us living in the house. I know that if I was home with my family, tensions might be a little bit high being locked up. Um, and then even just in general, like I walk my dog, and I'm used to, I live in a predominantly Hispanic neighborhood, so I
Mhm.
don't normally see a lot of Black people. And when I did, I used to really like interact with them. Like,
Yeah.
you just like, how we are, you see someone, you want to
The
speak.
the nod, the some.
Something. And
Yeah.
it's a little harder to do that now. Like you can't really just go up to people and talk to people. But I think that there's still been able, or I've still been able to find ways to connect with people around me, and to just make sure I'm being sensitive to how people are doing, and talking to people and talking about struggles when we can, and in the
Mhm.
forums that we can.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with everything you just said. I think that like we had talked about this before too, just like when I do see Black people, um and even especially like if I see Black people struggling, like I make it a point to just try to like speak and say something, because I do think that it is very important that we are there for one another, even if it's complete strangers. Sometimes just being able to like share a story, like vent, have a quick laugh, like it means a lot. I know it's meant a lot to me for strangers who've done it for me. So, just being there for our community, I think, yeah, it can definitely look like what you said, like patience, sensitivity, and empathy.
Right. Yeah. And to the point too of how this pandemic affects a lot of us very differently. I think we can say the same thing when we venture out and talk about the larger conversation of Black community protection. So
Mhm.
that's how we can protect each other today. But even outside of COVID, there's so many layers within this discussion. There's the physical of it, but there's also how we can protect each other interpersonally and within our families. I think that as important as it is for us to focus on protection externally as a unit, as a group, as a people, um,
Mhm.
we have to be sensitive to the different ways that society affects us all. Like as a Black woman, I know that the way I live my life and the things that affect me are similar, but maybe a little bit different than
Mhm.
my brother, my sister, my friend. There's so many different layers to it, and we could talk all day, but I do want to
We
kind of
always.
enter into how we can protect each other within our family units. I know you have a lot to say about that as well as Tabitha.
Yeah, like it's to me, like when it comes to like protecting like our families, like just to understand that like we as Black people have all gone through trauma, and that trauma, like you said, like it has an effect on us as human beings. Like as much as we sometimes want to act like we're tough and that it doesn't, and we can just it can just roll off, it ends up manifesting in different ways. So first, like just recognizing that we all do share like this collective trauma, and like just the admittance of that is huge. um and then just like thinking about like something that came to mind when thinking about this was like generational curses. And I know like we talk about like generational curses like within my family and like in church and stuff, and it's like, okay, like, well, what generational curses like can we break in our family? um like one curse that I can think of is the curse of lack of communication. I know so many times that like things that have happened, whether it be like friends, family, work, like whatever it is, where it was easier for me, I thought, to bottle it up inside than actually have those conversations. And then I
Yeah,
ended up realizing like what a weight that put on me and how much that was affecting my life, because I could one day just end up exploding,
yeah,
and just how important it was to just communicate so that other people could understand like where I was coming from and I could understand where they were coming from. And literally that just happened this past weekend with my family, and it helped me so much to lift the weight off. But no one teaches us like how to communicate with the people that we love effectively. But
yeah.
like, yeah, what were you
Sorry, I
gonna say?
cut you off.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say same. I actually just had something over the weekend too, where communication was protecting myself, and I, within me communicating with someone, I had to realize that one, some of us, how do I say this? In the same way that you said the lack of communication is almost like a generational curse for you, it's so normalized for some of us. And we
Mm-hmm.
think that, like you said, you're protecting yourself by not communicating. And that's not what's happening. So sometimes when you do communicate with people, it can come off, or people who are in that mentality, it can come off as offensive, or like,
Yeah.
people don't really know how to react or respond sometimes. And I think that's why forums like this, which is kind of part of the reason why we're doing that, and just normalizing these conversations about things, and just the many layers of it, and making it okay to talk about the tough stuff. A lot of
Mm-hmm.
people don't, as Black people, I know a lot of people in my family, and one of the biggest generational things for us, especially being from a family where a lot of women, we're strong women. I know we hate the strong Black woman thing, but regardless, like
Yeah.
I'm a strong woman. The women in my family are strong, in the most positive aspects, because we're also soft and timid, and we can,
Mm-hmm.
be feminine and docile when we choose as well. But sometimes being strong or safeguarding yourself feels like not communicating. So I really do like that you highlighted that, and it's something that I continuously, like, any types of disagreements I get into, you know me, I'm super chatty. So it's
Yeah.
easy for me to figure out the best way to maneuver a conversation and say what I want to say. But I have to be sensitive to the people around me and know that, like, okay, me communicating really easily may be intimidating to them. They may not be
Mm-hmm.
receptive to this. And also they might not even know how to respond. They might not be as comfortable. So that also links to the point that we were making before about being empathetic and knowing the people around you and being sensitive and meeting them where they are.
Yeah.
And I want to take a second and read some of the comments, make sure we're keeping the people in the conversation. Communication is hard because most of us are too defensive to constructive criticism.
Hmm.
Agreed. Some of us, we're conditioned to be, I think a lot of us, myself included, like I'm young, but I did have my phase of being very defensive whenever I was criticized. And I think that thinking back to the moments where I felt defensive, especially with people around me, it was sometimes because they were hitting on things that
Yeah.
I felt sensitive about, or because I felt like a lot of times when I got into these really big blow ups, it's like, I'm doing the best I can. Like, like you just
Hmm.
feel like we all have this, or I'm sure we've all experienced a moment of like, you're coming for me over something and I'm trying my best. And I think that that's kind of what happens a lot within our interpersonal relationships and externally, when we're hit with criticism as people who are sometimes struggling.
Yeah. I agree. I feel like that those like what you described was like that's triggers. And like, we do try to like, especially like nowadays, a lot of people try to be more mindful of people's triggers.
Yeah.
So that, because we realize that once you hit those, like people will act in a defensive way. I know I do. And I try to be mindful of them too. And I know that like one thing that I've been practicing is like something that my partner like tells me to do is he's like, try, I know you're feeling these emotions, but like try not to come to me in your emotion, like feel it, recognize that you're feeling some sort of way. He's like, but just try to explain it to me without coming to me, especially with anger.
Yeah.
Because like I never mean to hurt you, but I need to understand what I did to hurt you. So also tell me how I made you feel, not that I meant to do something. Don't put what you believe to be my intention on me. Like let me tell you what my intention was. Don't put it on me. And that takes patience. Like that takes like taking a breath and thinking, before you react.
Yeah.
Um, but it's I think I it's a skill, but I feel like we are more than capable of doing it because we've learned so much to be able to even just get to this point right now.
Yeah. I was going to say, like, credit to that, because if we're talking about protection, like the fact that you and your partner are kind of breaking down, like you said before, generational traumas and curses and making sure that you're doing better for your kids and you're communicating better, which I think a lot of us are doing. And I also feel
Mhm.
like we sometimes don't give each other enough credit for how much we are breaking through when it comes to communicating and talking about these things, whether it's on social media or in person. I know that within the last, I can't think of a good enough time frame, but couple
Mhm.
of years, there have been conversations that have happened that I remember a time where people didn't even want to talk about them,
Yeah.
and things like mental health being one, and it just being more normalized and healthy for us to have these conversations about them. We have to give ourselves credit for making it to that point. I think a lot of people don't
Mhm.
realize that. And when we're speaking on generational traumas, as much as protecting ourselves looks like identifying and healing from them, it's also important to identify the strengths within them. Like
Yes.
you said, having come from a family who didn't communicate, it kind of made you stronger, made you a stronger communicator. I know for me, it did.
It definitely made me, because it was in order to try to rise above. Like I knew what my weaknesses were, and I knew that I'd been so used to not communicating, and so it's like I had to push myself,
Right.
and that pushing myself, like there was growth not only in the communicating, but it was growth in all these other places, because it was like if I could learn this, like what else could I learn?
Yeah. Yeah, same. And I think that that paired with, you know, just also being strong and having that like generational strength, like it makes me more willing to tackle things like that and to
Mhm.
go forward and want to make things better, because it's like I know what I've experienced, but I've also been given the strength of those before me, not trying to
Yes.
glorify pain or anything, but that's just the reality. As much as I'm going to acknowledge my traumas that I'm going from, I'm also going to acknowledge the things that made me strong and made me to be the person that can be unapologetic about my growth and about the things that I want to change. And I seen a quote that I love that
Mhm.
said, like, your ancestors gave you more than just wounds. Like, they didn't, like, as much as we went through and as much as that may have crippled us in some ways, it also made me strong. Like, I wouldn't want to be anything but Black. It
Mm.
gives me a different type of walk. It makes me um, more confident and knowing the things that I've been through, knowing the things that I have overcome, even if it comes to just, if it's as simple as communicating, um,
Mhm.
adding that to the plethora of things that Black people have done before me or that my family members have done, it all strengthens me up and it just makes me more intentional about what I'm putting out there and what I'm contributing to the community, because sometimes protection looks like being you unapologetically,
Mhm.
stuff, and being you in certain spaces. So yeah,
Yeah.
I lost my train of thought, but I hope
No,
that.
no, but I wholeheartedly agree. I wholeheartedly agree. I feel like, to that last point of what you said about like, although we've experienced traumas, like there's also been like great lessons that we've learned from our ancestors, like alive and those who have passed. And I think that it's like although like struggle, like it's hard, and I hate that our people ever had to go through this, but like there is there is in resiliency, like there's like ingenuity, there's
Yeah,
ingenuity in resilience.
yes,
And so I feel like that is a huge lesson that like my family has placed on me, is to be like, whatever it is that you're going through, it's never enough to break you. It
yes.
never will, because
And
there's always a way.
one thing, again, going back to our point about community and how that's protection, that just made me think of how we've all been operating throughout everything, not even just this pandemic, but life
Mm-hmm.
in general. One thing I love the most about Black people is our ability to find humor in the hardest
Mm-hmm.
of times. Sometimes, and I feel like sometimes that's protection too, like us
It
being able
is.
to laugh, like being
Yeah.
able to share a meme that describes exactly how you feel, like that matters. And that's protection too, for us to have humor and laugh with each other. And want to make sure, sorry, I thought I saw a good comment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, us, like being able to laugh. And I feel like that's something, I don't, Black people, we are naturally funny. Working at Push Black and going through all this history and reading some of these stories, like I cackle at some of the things that I come
That
across.
some of the writers have said.
Yes, the writers,
Yeah.
but even just quotes from prominent Black people. I feel like we have always been funny. Like we have been a funny people. And I just love that that's something that's transcended and that we find these creative ways to be an outlet for our traumas or the things that we're going through. And
Mm-hmm.
speaking of protection too, and Black people being creative, I feel like our culture and gatekeeping these
Yeah.
things matters a lot as well when it comes to community protection. Like there's been a lot of conversations about just how easily we're saying how memes are funny and such, but it also leads to these discussions about what's ours and what should rightfully be ours and not
Mm-hmm.
appropriated by others.
Drea, yes. Like, we all know like how contagious Black culture is. Um, like, because like we said before, we're creative and we're resilient. But like at the same time, like we should not allow other cultures to happily occupy our cultures without doing the work that leads to our liberation. Like, how can you borrow my culture but not care for me?
Right.
And I feel like we have to, for me, I had to come to a place where I felt that way, where I felt like, because to be honest, there was one point where I was like, huh, like, okay, like maybe this is all right. Like maybe this is all right. You know, maybe we're blending more towards one, but then it's like you just understand that it's the people of privilege that are being able to do this. They get to try on your culture, but
Right.
they don't have to live in it.
Right.
And we do like have to do more as a community to safeguard that. Like we're given so much, we've given so much to contribute to American society, so much to contribute to American culture. And like it's time that the culture from the dominant groups stop stealing without actively supporting restitution towards Black people.
Yes. Someone in the comments said our culture has always been taken and exposed to others and have been created into wealth. And
Yep.
precisely, when I think of social media to the people, I work on Push Black's Instagram team, and I also have a background in social media, so I'm just delved in social media culture. So over the years, there's kind of been a growing conversation about how the way that we talk and our vernacular is like Gen Z and millennial
Oh
culture.
my
And
gosh. Yes, girl.
no, that's
Yes.
Black people. Like
Yes.
that's Black people, like saying it's the blank for me and sis. I feel like this is our lingo, and there has to be. And I think that there was I know for people within my generation, there was this moment where some people felt like we should be happy because people were trying to talk like us and people were trying to be like us and we're just that dope, like, you know. And I'm like, to a certain extent, like you
Mm-hmm.
now we're to the point where it's so easy to steal and take things from people and be and whitewash it, honestly. Like
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
when we think about social media and TikToks, there's always a story of something that goes viral and there's a Black person behind it that
Yep.
we don't find out about until months later when someone's like, hey, this person did that first. And that's not okay. And people don't understand that that seems minute to one person, but there are people making money off of social media. So if a
Mm-hmm.
Black person came up with it, a Black person needs the credit for it. And
Yes.
I think when it comes to community protection and us fostering these kinds of conversations, things like that need to be taken into account. And we have to be sensitive to the fact that it may seem minute to you that Kim Kardashian's wearing braids or that somebody said something and you think that it's not that big of a deal. But one, you don't know who that triggered. And two, these things lend to a bigger picture. We know that white supremacy seeps its roots in almost everything. And if
Mm-hmm.
we know anything from looking at the evolution of systemic racism and patriarchy, we know that something that seems minute lends to the whole. And I feel like people have to realize that these things are small, but they lend to us not having what we need later. They lend to our culture being trampled over and people stealing from us. And it also like stifles some of our voices because sorry if I'm ranting, you know how I
Mm-hmm.
feel about this type of stuff.
I know.
But when it comes to like thinking of the where culture and gatekeeping collides, I feel like a lot of the times it's at the expense of Black women and the LGBTQ community. Like when we're thinking about our fashion and our humor and our sayings, a lot of that stuff came from Black people and it came from Black gay people. And as much as you want to say like, oh, this is all of us and we should ignore that, that's not okay. And we shouldn't be gaslighting folks and we should just be having each other's backs and realizing that it seems like something little to you, but it's all of us, it's our culture and it should be protected. And again, you just don't know what triggers who.
1,000%. And I think that like what that protection then looks like is it's like if you see like for me, if I see someone doing that, like to me, it's not okay to like idly sit by and just allow it to happen and to just be quiet about it. Like I have to be vocal about the fact that that's happening.
Yeah.
And because in order to make people like this change, like you need to make them a little bit uncomfortable because what they're doing is uncomfortable to me.
Right.
And so why should I have to make someone else feel comfortable when they're not having that same consideration for me? Speaking of earlier, patience and empathy and sensitivity. Like, you know, we can, I think it's highly important that we extend this within our communities, but for the people outside of our communities that aren't looking to do that, I think that we have to like let it be known it's not
Yeah.
okay.
And sometimes protection looks like just listening. Like even if
Mm-hmm.
you don't, I know for myself, like there are some things I would not even dare purse my lips over. I am a light-skinned Black woman with fine hair. Like there are certain topics that I won't even think to say anything about because I know that there are experiences that other women around me have not dealt with. And it's not on me to say, oh, well, because of my experience, that doesn't matter. That's not how it works. Like we have to, if living my life as a Black woman has taught me anything, it's that I deal with things that some people would never understand and
Yeah.
and that don't make sense sometimes, but to hear that I shouldn't be worried about certain things, like that would be triggering to me. And I feel like a lot of people don't realize that sometimes you just have to step back and you have to listen and understand that it's not about what the bigger issue is. I think
Mhm.
it makes me cringe when I hear like, oh, we shouldn't be focused on that. We should be focused on this right now. Like, oh, we shouldn't be focused on homophobia. We should just be focused on police brutality. It's like, well, Black liberation isn't just a certain set of people being liberated from one certain thing. It's when we all feel free. It's when we all feel like we can walk in this world as whoever we want to be. And I think that a lot of the issues with conversations within our culture is that we kind of can get lost in our own problems sometimes. And rather than see that your problems still matter, but
Mhm.
they matter to the collective whole. Like you have to care about your issues as well as everyone else's. We're not going to be liberated until we are all liberated, not just some of us.
1,000%. I agree. Like to your point about recognizing like what the intersection of yourself is and how that is in relationship to other people. Like in the color, I mean the topic of like even like colorism, like to understand, like even like for me to understand that as a Black woman, like we need to uplift darker skinned Black women who sometimes have to deal with the brunt of people who just have internalized racism. And like as it's our job to like point out against like people from stealing our culture, it's also our job to point out when people are displaying like self-hatred towards Black people or internalized issues. Like it's to me, at least, I can't tell you what to do, but I feel like it's my job because that's not okay. Because
Yeah.
we need to protect each other. It's not okay for us to demoralize each other. And if I can understand that, you know, in a lot of aspects, darker skinned women have it more difficult than I do, then it's my job to protect them when I can. And, you know, and there's other ways that they can protect me. But like with that it is about protecting each other.
Yeah. I'm going to look through the comments and see what other folks have to say.
Um, I see someone says, so now as a grown woman, since others take our culture, but are also trying to achieve our pure beauty by enhancing body parts, etc., lips, body. Like, how do we feel about it? About people trying to emulate like our physical attributes.
Yeah.
I personally feel like it's really like there's no other way to describe it than I find it like really disturbing. Like I find it very disturbing that like, you know, like back in the day when, and I say back in the day, but this is like just in the recent past where, you know, people were going to parties doing blackface. But blackface is one thing, but literally to surgically enhance yourself, to take on the attributes of another culture, I find that it's really odd. It's really odd and off-putting to me. And I mean, I get other people's wants to feel good about themselves, but I don't think that that is the way that you do it. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, I feel like we were saying before, you don't know what triggers who. So I know when it comes to certain things, it it depends on how I feel in that moment. Like
Mm-hmm.
it really, and I think that's real too. Like depending on how my
Mm-hmm.
day went, I might be more bothered than I would be on a normal day. And I feel like that speaks to the duality and the fact that we all respond to things differently because it's not just one blanket way we should all feel about things. Like I
No.
know as someone who's deep in some of these stories that we do, like Sarah Bartman, and we know the history of how people how white people treated our bodies and talked about us. Like that's triggering. It's triggering. And then to see that, I think for me, the biggest issue is seeing that paired with other attempts to like hijack our culture. Like it's almost like, okay, you want to look at us, look like us, but then you also want to make money off of us from looking
Mhm.
like us. And, it's just, that's where it gets bothersome for me.
Yeah.
And going back to protection again, it looks like for me, acknowledging that some things will bother other people more than me, but it's not on me to just diminish what irritates someone, what takes away their peace. Like there are so many things that we have rights to be mad about. We really do.
Yes. I feel like it's your, like, it's not your right to diminish it, but you need to listen. Like, you need to question without judgment and listen, to understand, like, what is it exactly that's bothering them? Because there's things, like, even we've had conversations and there's things that you brought up that bothered you, and I had to, like, understand like what it was, and like to understand your perspective. And once I could see your perspective, like, I got it.
Yeah.
But yeah, we have different things that we accept and don't accept, even as it comes to like people stealing different attributes of our bodies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wanted to read another comment. I was expecting a video on how to protect ourselves from being the next George Floyd or the next Ahmaud Arbery. And I just want to double back to just the layers. So when we talk about community protection, we all obviously know that as much as we would love to all run out to the streets and be on the front lines and really push and physically fight for a change, we have to, and this is what me and Tabitha were thinking when we were coming up with this live, is that we got to be on the same page for that. And community protection, it's like we said in the beginning of the live, it's just as much mental as it is physical. We don't know how to.
And just as much relational too, like relational for us to be on the same page, and mental, but like relational and not just physical too.
Exactly. And if we're thinking about the deacons for self defense, these men quit their jobs to go out and protect our community. And that was kind of what stood out a lot for Tabitha and I coming up with this live, because the first thing I thought is, that's dope. And yeah, like as much as I would love to haul everyone up and be like, yeah, let's go out and let's protect ourselves. We know that that's not realistic because circumstances are different. Everybody can't be on the front lines. Everybody may not have the mental wellness to do that. And I think that that's the importance of this conversation, is for us to all acknowledge that there's steps that we have to take to get to that level. And there's, when we talk about Black community protection, we all may not be able to go run out and fight and be the Black Panthers, but we all can be sensitive and empathetic to those around us. And that's kind of the conversation that we wanted to start here today, and make sure that we were discussing all the factors of it, and also being realistic about what this looks like for people in their daily lives, and getting that conversation going, and also getting feedback from the Push Black audience on just what you all think protection looks like and what the steps are in conjunction with some of these things we're talking about.
Yeah, I know. I agree. I think that there's so many different layers to what you said, to the conversation of protection, and like being able to have like even like a criminal justice expert like come in, and maybe we can have that conversation in the future. But like the police brutality like against Black people, um it affects us daily even if you are literally experiencing it in that moment or not, just like being in situations where you think that you might experience it. And
Yeah.
what that actually is mental trauma. And if we can't be able to deal with that, while trying to actually deal with, like tactical means of protection as it relates to physical violence, like, then it's hard for us to actually get there, because without a clear mind we can't even think straight about tactics.
Right. Right. Yeah. Let's see if we see any more comments.
So what are you thinking, Drea? Like, because I know there's all conversation about like the LGBTQ community, and Black people? And like, what does it look like, or what can it look like for Black protection of the Black LGBTQ community?
Well, I think for myself, for not being a part of the community, it would be listening to the community and not trampling over the community. And we kind of were hinting on this on our last conversation about like social media and stuff. And I'm just always going to link everything back to social media because I work in social media and
Mm-hmm.
we're on social media.
Yep.
So I think one thing I'm actually really, really proud of is the fact that there's been an increase in protection for vulnerable communities. And I think there should be a lot more. And I think that, like we said before, the first step to that is taking a step back and realizing that it's not simply about you and your pain points and how you interpret the Black experience or what it should be
Mm-hmm.
like. Liberation is for all Black people. And you just never know what someone else needs. You don't, it's just not on us to dictate how, what should take priority. Because I think that when we talk about Black liberation or protection or anything, I kind of think, and Tabitha, you and I have different thoughts on this, but
Mm-hmm.
I, I used to think, better yet, I'm going to adjust that because of our conversation. I used to think that these conversations kind of defaulted to Black men and just the issues that are faced on a granular scale. And I just felt like a lot of the times we knew for a fact that Black LGBTQ people were being left out of this conversation, but I feel like also Black women were being left out. But I know Tabitha, you kind of felt the adverse. And again, another point of why these conversations are really important because we kind of have to put our thoughts together and just kind of hone back on some of the stereotypical thoughts we all might be holding sometimes, or some how we might just be unintentionally I can't find the proper word, but backspacing out other communities and not taking into account what they're going through as well.
Yeah. It was funny how we looked at this differently. And but like once we got into the conversation, it made a lot of sense because I feel like Black women and the LGBT community like are really much so like being highlighted in the fight for Black liberation. But I felt like in a lot of ways, like Black men were being left out of the conversation. And we like, I can talk about, Black women and LGBTQ communities and like the protections that we and they need. But I felt like the protections that Black men needed were being left out of the conversation. Like, for instance, like, when we look at Black men, like there are stereotypes and pressures that are placed on Black men that assume Black men are like more men than they are human beings, like the rest of us. Like, even the idea that like Black men are strong and like they can't cry, they can't, appear weak or soft and things like that. But it's like everyone, like, I don't care if you're a man or a woman, we all have the full spectrum of emotions. And I feel like in a lot of ways, Black men are denied that ability to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
And that we kind of pressure them back into a corner to be strong and to be almost like an avatar of what we think a man should be. That's
Yeah.
just my opinion.
And when we were talking about this, and what was the first line you said that you felt like Black men were being erased out? That triggered me because I'm like, what? I was seeing the total opposite. I
Mm-hmm.
like, if we think back to the awful time of like May through what, like July of last year,
Mm-hmm.
with George Floyd. And for myself, the first thing I saw was like an influx of posts that were like, dear Black men, we love you, like we, whatever the whole spiel was. And I felt like that's kind of always what I saw, and it triggered me at first because I'm like, okay, do people not realize that Black women also deal with police brutality, statistically not at the higher rate, but we still deal with it. And then that kind of triggered the conversation between us two about how we, even if we're not the ones directly bearing the physical brunt, uh, Black women are the moms, the sisters, the wives. We're still dealing with it in the same way. So to hear that, Black men have it like a ton harder, whatever the saying was. Sorry, I forgot exactly what you said. I don't want to put
Mhm.
words in your mouth. But that just triggered me because I just realized. But then once we started the dialogue and realized where you were coming from with your points and what I was seeing, we met in the middle and realized what we all know to be true, which is that we all deal with stuff. And it
Yeah,
seems
we all do.
like, yeah, it seems like the opposite is dealing with something at the higher rate, and not even just resting on the fact that we all deal with it, but if we are looking to be liberated, we're looking to be like to protect each other, then
Mhm.
the approach should be to just acknowledge that we all deal with things and see it for what it is, but also not ignore statistics. Like, we're not going to say that Black men aren't being shot more than police. We're also not going to say that patriarchy doesn't exist and Black women aren't being oppressed in a multitude of other ways that Black men don't experience either. Both of these matter, and when
Mhm.
we want to protect ourselves in our communities and have conversations that lead to viable outcomes, it
Mhm.
takes that baseline level of learning and understanding and empathy, like we said before.
Yeah. No, I agree. I do still feel like I'm like, I just want to have have a space sometimes to have conversations about these different groups, like what we're doing right now, these different groups of Black people that are being affected, and Black men included, and even just allowing them the space to highlight like in the ways that it affects them. But I get your point. I just did not see all the memes and stuff like that because I do not I'm not on social media anywhere near the amount that you are. So I know you got inundated with a lot during the protests and everything last year.
Yeah, and we also were talking about too, because we got really deep on this topic, but
Mm-hmm.
just the fact of how our upbringings uh, played a big role in our understandings of this as well. You were saying how you were raised by a lot of strong women, and
Mm-hmm.
same for me. But our experiences within that kind of altered how we felt about this, and we wouldn't have known that if we didn't hear each other out and have
Yeah,
a conversation about it. We
communication.
start the dialogue, yeah. And
Yeah.
it literally led us to where we are today, which is having this conversation and trying to have it with the rest of our audience here. So, yeah, I feel like this just lends to the largest point of what we wanted to get across here, which is just that community protection starts with us. It's as much as we want it to be, and as much as it is,
Mm-hmm.
these really radical efforts and this radical organizing in groups, the what's more obtainable to everyone else is our daily, and it matters just as much to be sensitive to those around you, to not be judgmental to those around you, to have conversations and not be afraid to dig into stuff and not have your walls up and realize that we are all dealing with stuff and we all at the end of the day want the same outcome, and in order to do that it has to start somewhere.
Yeah. No, I everything you said, and even just thinking about like Black children, like, and just talking about like going back to the conversation of like generational curses. Um, I look at children like completely different than a lot of other people. Like, I look at them not just as children, but like as people who will one day be adults, and that like we must teach them like
Uh-oh, I think we lost you, Tabitha. 1 second.
told to do something or asked to do something if they're not, they're not owed an explanation. And I get that from a sense of like, you're in a hurry maybe and you don't have time to explain. Like, I get that. But I think that it's so important in teaching children to explain to them the why so that they can understand it for themselves and can say for themselves, like, I agree with that, or I understand that.
Yeah.
Because in order to be an adult, they have to have autonomy. And the autonomy is the ability to say that, like, I agree and I can make my own decisions. And so I just feel like, for me, one of those things that we can do to protect our children is literally just explaining things to them so that they know for themselves. They feel confident in themselves, in the things that they're doing or in the decisions that they make.
Yeah. I love that you brought up kids. I have a 10-year-old little brother, and
Mhm.
I'm 25. People don't know, and I think back to being a child, and our I feel like back in the day, it was thought that protection was by not telling us things or just
Mhm.
like talking at us rather than having discussions with us. And I still turned out fine, but seeing my little brother, my parents are doing things a little bit differently. Like he has a voice. They have discussions with him, which again lends to the evolution of how far we've come. And
Mhm.
thanks to social media and other platforms and spaces where we can connect with each other and share stuff and normalize certain things and realize that the way that we were doing them in the past might not have been entirely correct.
Or
So
it might have worked for then, but it just doesn't work for now.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. It's okay to adjust. Yeah. And I think that that's a big part of Black community protection is not feeling so tied to our traditions sometimes. Like as much as we want to gatekeep and hold stuff, hold tight to certain things, I think that sometimes when it comes to the future of Black people, we have to really interrogate like our why we were doing things. Were we doing things from a scarcity mindset? Were we doing things out of fear?
Mhm.
I think a lot of that interrogation has to happen.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, it starts with like ourselves, like interrogating
Yeah.
ourselves and why we like, does it make sense for us to continue to do this thing that we're doing? And because of where we're trying to go.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. So I think to wrap this up, I would love to know what your hopes for Black futures and Black unity is.
So I would say my hope for Black futures is that we're able, like as individuals, to foster the community and to and just like for Black unity, um, I would hope that we're all able to understand our privileges and our disadvantages, even within the Black community, and give each other like healthy grace to heal from those things,
Yeah.
and then maybe we can like come together even stronger. What
Yeah.
about you? What do you think?
I agree. I think my hope is that, more of us feel empowered, informed, and connected than those of us that don't, and that none of us know what Black liberation looks like, but
Yeah.
it definitely starts with unity and community empowerment. And I think protection looks different for all of us. For some, it could be positive affirmations and being an open ear to a friend, a coworker. For others and those of power, it's safeguarding our resources and ensuring issues that bother our communities don't go unchecked. But one thing we all can do is listen to each other, and I
Mhm.
think that we're getting there, and I hope that more Black people continue to feel connected and strong and supported by others in their community. And like we said multiple times, I think it starts with these conversations.
Yeah, I do too. I think it is a huge part of us getting there
Yeah,
and being able to even like strategize. Like if we can come together and have these healthy relationships, then we can strategize about all of the other things that we want to see happen within our community.
right.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Tabitha. We can open it up to the audience for a few minutes. If anyone wants to let us know how you felt about this discussion, what are other topics you'd like us to talk about? Does this time and day work for you all? We want to make sure that we're doing these things in a way that reaches all of our audience. And how did you come across this live? Any feedback anyone wants to drop, you can share it in the comments. We'll stick around for a few more minutes. Did you have anything you missed, Tabitha?
Um, Shoot, girl, you know we can talk about this forever.
We got a comment though. We got a comment. No disrespectful when you say other people safeguard their wealth and the things that they have obtained. Didn't they obtain that from us? We're the builders, we were the free service. Hmm. Not really sure I understand. Do you get the comment, Tabitha?
Um, from what I hear, it sounds like he's agreeing, like that we provided the free creativity to other
Right.
people to build wealth.
And we should be safeguarding that. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
I
agree.
agree. I
I
totally
agree 100%. I feel like we should be safeguarding in some way, shape, or form that makes it less easy to steal and capitalize off of things that are authored by us.
Yeah, I another
And
comment
that's
I
the woman.
see.
That I'm sorry, Sharon. I think I was reading it to her.
Oh, that's funny. Um, so there's another comment here, and it says that we must build each other up instead of competing and tearing each other down in order to attain what we perceive as success, as defined by those on the outside. And I feel like I 1,000% agree with that. Like when we when I first came here to Push Black, and then even just like meeting you, and I told you this a million times, like there are things that you are gifted at that I'm just not. And then, like I got talents that you don't have. And although we have like the same job title, like it was very important for me to like establish the fact that like I don't want to compete with you. Like, because I don't see the need to. I don't want to compete with you. I want to work with you. And I want to give you your space to shine. And then I have mine. And like we can keep this going and build each other up.
Tabitha, I can't. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, you're back. Um, yeah, when we were having
Can
that
you hear
discussion.
me?
Oh, sorry. You're coming back in.
Okay.
Coming out. I think you're back. Oh, sorry. You're coming back out. I can hear myself from your computer. We're wrapping up, but whenever Tabitha hears me, I do want to wrap up the point she was making about how we both have talent. And one thing that I think matters in pointing that out is the fact that us being able to look at each other and say, you have something that I don't, and not feel threatened by that, I think is also a privilege in itself. And I wish Tabitha could come back on so she can speak for herself. But I know that for me, I went to Howard University and HBCU. So I feel like I had a prelude to being in a Black space with people who were where I didn't have to feel like it was a competition for resources or for anything like that. And I think when we talk about, or whenever I hear other folks say that, Black people are crabs in a barrel and we're always in competition with each other, I think community protection also looks like acknowledging where those things come from. And sometimes, and for a lot of these things, it comes from insecurity, which is rooted from a scarcity mindset. Not a lot of people are privileged enough to be in a space where they feel like it's enough resources for everyone to go around. So as much as it is realistic that some people are in competition with folks that look like them, I think that it's really important for us to acknowledge where that comes from. And like we said throughout this whole thing, be empathetic towards it and, interrogate it and understand it and make sure that we're dismantling those systems so that going forward, those that come after us don't feel like they have to operate in that same manner. So unless Tabitha is back in, I think
Can you
we'll
hear
leave
me?
it there. I can hear you now, Tabitha. Did you hear me
Okay.
that whole time?
Yes, I can hear you the entire time.
Okay, good, because I'm like, yeah. Actually, I think we got a comment you did. My mom wouldn't allow me to go to an all Black college. Yeah, and like even talking to experiences, like when it became time for me to go to Howard, I didn't even know what an HBCU was, as wild as that sounds. Like I was
Mhm.
in my junior year of high school and I had not even heard the term. And that was like the catalyst for me and the person that I am today, because then I was lucky enough to go to Howard and have the experience and really be able to just break down some of the things that I didn't even realize was not to say holding me back, but anti-Black, like just anti-Black. And I was privileged enough to go to a space and realize that. And I can literally see it in the difference between some of the people I went to high school with, that I get it. Like I can fully understand why certain people
Mhm.
act a certain way, because you don't have that information. You're not exposed to it. And again, it's a privilege for me to have that information and be able to see things from an empathetic level. So I'm also going to be patient with others who don't and who are still in some of those mindsets that I had when I didn't know what a HBCU was. So,
Yep.
anything else, Tabitha?
No, girl. I think um I just want to thank everyone for joining us and like participating in this conversation. Like it means a lot to Dre and I, and then even just to Push Black at large, be able to like interact with you guys like on a level like this. So like you said, like drop a comment and just let us know like how you felt about it and what it is that you guys would like to discuss, so we can continue to have these spaces where we can meet and talk and just have community.
Yes. Thank you all so much. And we look forward to doing more of these.
Yes.
See you, Tabitha.
All right. Bye.